Hey, what's up, YouTube fans? So, the topic for this video, right, is the evolutionary reducibility of the behavior of sex, right? Specifically, the behavior of how humans and other mammals have sex, right? Showing that the differing parts of the behavior would not need to all come about in a single step. It can be broken down into a series of steps, each useful in its own right, each that could give advantage towards successfully producing offspring in its own right. So first, so like, what type of behavior am I talking about? So like basically just, which by the way, this is probably gonna be a little bit inappropriate for children, just saying. But you know, the male comes up to the female, puts its penis into her vagina and humps her basically. So the evolutionary reducibility of that behavior. So first off, sexual reproduction goes all the way back to even before animals, all the way back to when our ancestors were single-celled organisms. There are plenty of single-celled organisms that have sexual reproduction and male and female. We also, we see plants have sexual reproduction in male and female. Fungi do. And so something does not need to have a nervous system in order to be able, like for a species to be capable of sexual reproduction. They don't need to have a nervous system. They don't need to have like a complex behavior involved, right? Sponges, which are one of the most simple of living animals, right? They are capable of sexual reproduction, right? But there's not really much work required on their part. They don't have to go up to each other or anything. They just stay in place in the water, and they just release sperm and eggs into the water, and it just drifts together in the water, right? The water just drifts it together. There's not really much more work required on the part of the sponge. It just drifts together through the water, right? And then a more advanced form of the behavior of sex would be what we see in most fish. There are exceptions, but what we see in most fish is the male and female actually come up to each other before releasing sperm and egg. So they don't just stay in place like a sponge. They actually do come up to each other. But there's no penetration, no physical contact of their bodies. They don't climb on top of each other, none of that. But they just come up near each other, and they release sperm and egg into the water, and it fertilizes externally. What would be the next step? Well, so what we see commonly in amphibians, such as frogs, most frogs, when they have sex, the male climbs on top of the female, and yet there still is no penetration. They don't put a body part into another body part, no penetration. The fertilization still happens externally in the water, right? They release sperm and egg into the water. It fertilizes externally, and yet nonetheless, they still get benefit from the male climbing on top of the female, right? So that step can come before the eventual step of the penetration, right? And then also what next, right? So for creatures to begin fertilizing internally does not require that they have a penis yet. That can be a later improvement, because what we see in most birds is they do fertilize internally, and yet the male does not have a penis. They just have a hole that releases sperm. It doesn't extend off of the body like how it does in human males and in other mammal males, right? It doesn't extend off the body like that, so it's not a penis. It's just a cloaca. It's a hole that releases sperm, right? And yet, nonetheless, they still are capable. They still manage to pull off internal fertilization without a penis, right? So the penis can be a later improvement that comes after internal fertilization, right? And so the behavior through which humans and other mammals have sex, it is reducible evolutionarily. It doesn't have to all come together at once in a single step. It can be broken down into a series of steps, each of which could be useful in its own right. And going back to the example of frogs, frogs are a good example of how there's a lot of like differences between different groups of animals and the specific behaviors that they have for sex, even though each one will tend to have very specific behaviors, and yet no particular set of behaviors is the only one that will work. There's a whole lot of different ones, this random way, that random way, that are about just as good one from the next, right? In frogs, we see differences between different groups of frogs, right? Different clades of frogs, in the way that they're like sex positions, like how do they climb on top of each other? Like what body parts do they grab when they climb on top? Which way do they face? It differs between different groups of frogs, right? And so the behavior is specific in a type of way that's inherited from parent to offspring, and yet none of these many different types of ways is the only way that'll work. Each of these ways works in its own right. Otherwise, if it didn't, the frogs that do it that way would not be around no more, right? But they still are around. Each way works. It doesn't have to be any particular way. Each of these ways works just fine, right? They still get on. And you can have inheritable variations occur within a species, which lead to differences in the behavior that a creature has when having sex, right? And some of these variations will happen to be ones which improve the odds of the individual with the trait successfully producing offspring, improves the odds compared to other individuals that do not have that variation, right? And so then that variation, if it's inheritable, if it can be passed on to the offspring, we then expect that by the next generation, a higher percentage of organisms within the population will have the feature. And then by the next generation after that, if it continues to have the same effect, by the next generation, an even higher percentage, and so on. And so the behaviors through which creatures have sex can be continually improved upon, better and better and better and better, through the process of evolution by natural selection. All right, that's all for now. See you guys.